explore adding triggers like S3 or API Gateway. Welcome back to AWS from scratch. I'm Alex, your AWS guide.
And I'm Sam, still your friendly beginner who's curious about everything. Today's topic feels exciting. What exactly is a serverless project, and how do we build one?
Great question. Serverless means you don't manage any servers yourself. Instead, AWS runs your code dynamically using services like Lambda, API Gateway, and DynamoDB. You pay only for the compute time you use.
Sounds magic, but how does it work in practice?
Here's a common example. Imagine building a simple back end that processes form submissions from a website and stores them in a database.
Okay, let's walk through it.
Step 1, your front end may be a static website hosted in S3.
That's the site people fill out forms on?
Exactly. When a user submits the form, it sends a request to API Gateway, which acts like the HTTP interface.
Like the door people knock on?
Exactly. API Gateway receives the request and triggers an AWS Lambda function, your custom code.
And then?
It could store the data in DynamoDB, which is a fully managed NoSQL database. No service to manage, just pay for storage and access.
That sounds simple and powerful. So we need Lambda, API Gateway, DynamoDB, and maybe S3 for hosting?
Exactly. And IAM roles to give permissions securely. Here's what happens end to end. The user submits the form on your static site, S3 plus CloudFront.
That's the site people fill out forms on?
Exactly. API Gateway receives the HTTP call, Lambda function processes it, Lambda writes to DynamoDB, optionally, Lambda sends notifications. All of this runs without you provisioning, patching, or scaling servers.
That's so clean. And billing is based on usage.
Yes, you pay for Lambda invocation counts and duration, API Gateway calls, and DynamoDB storage, read or write units. If traffic is low, costs stay minimal.
Great. But how do I actually set this up?
We'll typically choose a project folder, write a Lambda handler in Node.js or Python, define resources in an infrastructure as code tool like AWS SAM or Serverless Framework, and deploy. The tool takes care of wiring up API Gateway, Lambda, IAM permissions, and DynamoDB tables.
So I write code in config files, run a deploy command, and AWS builds it for me?
Exactly. SAM or Serverless Framework packages your Lambda code, creates CloudFormation templates for all resources, and deploys them with a command. It gives you an API endpoint and database table automatically.
This is awesome. So I can build a backend without worrying about servers at all?
That's the beauty of serverless. It's fast to develop, scales automatically, and keeps your operational overhead minimal.
I'm excited to try this. What's a good first mini project?
How about a to-do list API? It would include endpoints like create to-do, get all to-dos, update to-do, and delete to-do. Each endpoint triggers a Lambda function that interacts with DynamoDB. You can deploy it, call it via Postman or a simple web page, and it's all serverless.
Sounds like a perfect beginner project. Anything I should watch out for?
Sure, be aware of these. Cold starts. Lambda might take a moment to start after inactivity. IAM permissions. Keep access tight. Use least privileged roles. DynamoDB costs and capacity. Start with on-demand mode or monitor read-write throughput.
Great tips. So what should I do after this episode?
I'd try building your to-do API. Write 1 or 2 Lambda functions, deploy with SAM or Serverless Framework, call the API, and store data in DynamoDB.
I've got it. Thanks, Alex. I'm eager to start my first serverless project.
Awesome. In our next episode, we'll dive into monitoring and logging with CloudWatch, so you can see how your serverless functions behave in real time.
Can't wait. See you next time.
See you soon.